Welcome to the Smoke Pit, a place where veterans come to hang out, talk straight, and cut through the bullshit across party lines, just like we did in the military. My name is Katie Torbeck, 5051 Veterans President. Money in politics has created a system where political power tracks wealth, not representation. A handful of wealthy donors dominate funding streams. Dark money hides who is actually influencing elections, and candidates spend more time fundraising than actually governing. This is not theoretical. In the 2023-2024 election cycle, roughly $24 billion flowed through federal politics. Over $1.9 billion of that was dark money, designed to avoid public scrutiny. And about 80% of Americans say major donors have too much influence. So let's stop pretending this is a minor flaw in an otherwise healthy system. This isn't democracy functioning poorly. This is democracy structurally distorted. And tonight, we're not just talking about theory. We're here with Mayhem, the co-founder of Money Out of Politics, and with veterans from across the country and across the political spectrum to have a real conversation about where we are, what's broken, and what it's going to take to fix it. So I'd like to welcome Mayhem.
Thank you very much, Katie. I appreciate being able to come on here and talk to you guys as always. Looking forward to digging into a little bit of the history of money in politics. Believe it or not, most people just know about Citizens United, but it does date back all the way into the 1800s. So we'll get into that a little bit. Looking forward to the conversation.
And we'll popcorn it to Brian.
Hey everybody, my name is Brian. I'm with Massachusetts 5051. I'm a writer and speechifier, and I am here to learn about money out of politics because I actually don't know much about the legislation or anything about that. So I'm here more to be educated than to educate.
Steph?
Hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie Money, not associated with the actual topic for today, but I am here because I have some background with legislative and public policy, especially when it comes to veterans and military issues, and I'm here to have fun and discuss with all of y'all.
John.
Everybody, Sergeant First Class Retired John Moses, here to have a great discussion with Mayhem and the rest of the team. So smoke up if you got them, and I'm gonna pick Nick to go next. Smoking lamp is on, Nick. Oh, we got Rowdy.
Oh, hi. I'm not Nick. Rory, 5051 vets, comms director, Army veteran, Fort Bragg area. Yeah.
Hey y'all, Hannah here with 5051 Vets and Common Defense.
Hey, Sam Gibbons, state liaison for 5051 SC and candidate for South Carolina's 2nd Congressional District in the Republican primary. We're to learn about money in politics because I'm about to be asking for money in politics. So.
And I don't know what happened to Nick. I hope he comes back because, but last but not least, I do want to introduce Carl with Crayon Box Politics. He is our partner in this space in the Smoke Pit. So, oh shit, Nick's back. Nick, introduce yourself, and then we'll introduce Carl.
Sorry, out in the middle of the desert on an iPad with 5G, not Wi-Fi. So my name's Nick. I'm also like Brian, here to really learn because this is something I hear a lot about. I don't entirely know that much about. So just want to kind of get educated on the subject as well. so I might be quiet tonight. Thank you.
And again, we'll introduce Carl.
I am Carl. I'm the CEO of Crambox Politics, as Katie said. Um, I am here to learn about money and politics because I am the guy that rants and raves about how everything is a distraction because the voters are where the buck stops. But after doing some research, I discovered that money in politics is a problem. So looking forward to the discussion tonight.
Absolutely. I feel like this is one of the only ones we've all done research ahead of time so that we can come well versed in what we're about to talk about. And I would like to turn it over to Mayhem to give us a little bit of history lesson because he said it dates back all the way to the 1800s. So I do want to give him the floor to drop some knowledge.
Yeah, so I'll try to be a little quick. I'll start first by saying, I'm a recovering Republican, as some of you may know. No offense, it's kind of a little bit of a joke, but I kind of ramped down. I got 14 deployments, right? So I ramped down from this, and I start paying attention to what's going on around me, and nobody's talking. Everybody's yelling at each other, right? You guys have probably heard me say it before. And I was actually in a political conversation, and it was like half and half, right? Half left, half right. And it was like, obviously we're talking about like schmorshing, right? And it's like just screaming back and forth, right? You're a murderer, you're a forced birther, right?
Are you guys pretending that you will hear him, or do you hear him?
We can hear him. You can't.
Oh, that's good news. Anyway, the thing was, I kind of like interrupted and was like, hey, okay, we know what you guys don't like. What do you think the policy should be? Let's talk about that. And would you know that everybody on the call had the same opinion? Literally. When they got down to brass tacks, they all thought somewhere between 20 and 26 weeks, and with the three major exceptions, right? Like life and mother, incest, rape. And so it said to me, we need a unifying message. So I started looking for one. I started looking for what is an issue that across our country we all agree on. That issue is money in politics. This polls 86% across the aisle. Okay, it's safe to run on for either side. It's a much more difficult thing to participate, right? So just a little bit of history, going back all the way to 1867, the Naval Appropriations Act. Pun intended, you could call that the first real shot across the bow. But it prohibited, I'm here all week, guys, dad jokes for days. It prohibited federal officers from soliciting campaign funds from Navy Yard workers, okay? And that was the first time the government admitted that donations were kind of like just legalized extortion, okay? Fast forward, right? So this is where, it's like we're starting to have a conversation. 1907, the Tillman Act, you guys have probably heard of that. Following the Gilded Age, Teddy Roosevelt, he pushed through a ban he pushed the Tillman Act through to ban corporations from making direct contributions to federal candidates. Okay, now it's an important distinction, and we'll get there. That's the foundational wall, really, that stood for about 100 years. And then in 1971, 74, you have the FECA and the FEC. After Watergate, Congress created the Federal Election Commission to set strict limits on how much an individual can give, which we still see those limits today. They wanted transparency, right? Sunlight's the best disinfectant, is kind of their train of thought there. Now, here's where it gets a little wonky. In 1976, you have a case that's called Buckley v. Vallejo, and that's a big pivot. The Supreme Court ruled in this case that while you can limit contributions to a candidate, you cannot limit a candidate's spending of their own money. Okay, so by itself, right? We can say you can't give to this candidate, but we can't tell a candidate they can't spend their own money. And if you're thinking about, if you've heard the trope, money is speech, right? This is where it begins, Buckley v. Vallejo, okay? And then in 2002, you have what's kind of known as like the last stand, the last real decent effort to stop or put a limit to this stuff. And that was the McCain-Feingold, the BCRA. And that was a bipartisan attempt to ban soft money, right? Which is just unregulated donations to parties. And that was the last major attempt we had to put the genie back in the bottle before 2010, the one we all know about, Citizens United. Okay, so Citizens United, just for a little background, in 2008, a nonprofit called Citizens United, that's where the case name comes from, produced a documentary titled Hillary, the movie. And they wanted to air it on cable the night before the primaries, right, which is why it became a hot button issue. The Federal Election Commission blocked that, and they said it's electioneering communication, right, which would be a violation of federal law, right? Essentially, a long-form political ad is what this documentary was being billed as, and it was funded by corporate money, which was illegal under McCain-Feingold. But here's what they did: the Supreme Court didn't just rule on whether the movie could be shown. They used the case to revisit the very nature of corporate speech. And this is the big distinction. In a 5-4 decision, they argued that corporations are an association of people. Therefore, they have First Amendment rights. Right? So now you've taken a corporation and you've given it the same rights that we as individuals have, because their argument is it's a collection of individuals. All right? And then they also say, and this is where unlimited and really kind of the birth of super PACs happens. Their second portion of this ruling says that independent expenditures don't corrupt. Right? Now, I won't get into the legal jargon of that. What they're saying is, as long as it's not from that candidate's campaign, right, then it can't be corrupting money, right? Because it's not being given directly to them, which sets it up for what happens with super PACs. Super PACs are then able to form, and it's considered independent money. So they can be running an ad, and they can be part of a broader strategy. There's these two major assumptions that the Supreme Court, they assumed that donations would be transparent and reported rapidly on the internet. That did not happen. And they assumed that there would not be coordination between these independent organizations and the campaigns. So what you end up with is, and you guys have seen it, I mean, now I'm describing our current political landscape wherein you have a campaign, but they are absolutely coordinating with super PACs all over the country to run targeted ad campaigns in those areas. And so why that's dangerous from my perspective, we know that we live in the digital age, and some of you have heard me say it, and some of you probably saw the argument that kind of persisted after in one of the chats we have. I said, I want to see people in communities doing things that require both hands, right? And that was not to be ableist. That's simply to say, I want people off their fucking phones, right? Pardon my French, right? Get off your phone, right? Because when you think about it now, targeted ads all over the place, and they're trying to sway your opinion, and billions of dollars are being spent on this. And what are we glued to 24/7, right? You got a game, ad pops up. You're surfing the web, ad pops up. And those ads are tied to your digital identity, and they're targeting to influence you, to get you upset about things, to get you against things that may not even be true. Okay? This is what spending is doing. And so what you have, instead of a candidate being people-facing, they are now donor-facing, which is top-down government, which we are all against, right? Because we are of, by, and for the people, or at least we're supposed to be. So without going further along, that's kind of how Money in Politics, the organization, got started with myself and my co-founder. Many of you know her, Miss Haley. And that's kind of the brief history. I'll open it up for you guys' thoughts.
John?
Yeah, I'll go first. I feel like I'm a chatty guy. So first, ma'am, thanks for that great layout. I think that's really important information for us to all have. What really, and I'm going to ask you some questions. I think it's important, previous to the Gilded Age, I think money's been a problem in politics long before we started regulating it, right? So, even previous to the Gilded Age, you'd look at things like the Mexican-American War, which was really like a land grab for slavery and slaveholding. Does your history go further back? What do you see the roots of this? Has this been an American problem for a long time or just recently? And I kind of know the answer, but I'm kind of setting you up for a longer answer here, because I believe, and I think a lot of us believe, that money's always been part of it. It's just much easier for people to find it now. So kind of historically, even going back further, are there other examples that you see that even might carry forward to this day?
Boy, that's a loaded ass question there. I love it. All right, well, let's get right to it. Yeah, money has always existed. Influence has always existed, right? As long as power has been a thing, influence and the seeking of influence has been a thing. And, when you see it, and I forget, I think it was around 600 right? We see the first currency, right? It makes it really easy to exchange, something of value, right? And you're no longer having to carry cartloads to barter shit, right? And I think that's the point you probably started to see problems, right? Because I could surreptitiously slip money to, the senator in Rome, whatever the case may be. In early America, we see it show up differently. This is the birth of race as a concept, and that is tied to wealth, right? So rather than give up their money, right, they had an idea, and that idea was we can separate people based on the color of their skin, and all we got to do is say, you can own land, they can't. You can do this, they can't. This is all political. The 3/5, this is all about political power. So we've always been looking for ways to influence and get people elected into positions of power that suit our needs personally, right? And as you see this more pervasive in some of these other layers. So yes, it has always been a problem. But look, if you look at the healthcare system in the United States, another great example. Most people don't know the healthcare system in the US is a complete accident, right? What happened was, to feed the war effort, they put a limit on wages, right? You can't, because the rich companies that worked in this specific industry could then take all of the talent and all of the workers from industries that they needed for the war effort. So the War Department put a limit on labor. The way they got around that was by offering benefits, right? And so now, as you see, now these corporations start gaining more power by doing things like this, and eventually you see it it starts to hit its mark in 1976. So here's what I'd say. Yes, it's always been an issue. And now the on-ramp we've seen going from, say, 2010, where you're seeing in a federal election about $3.8 billion be spent, to just like what Katie just said, completely accurate, $24 billion in the 24 federal election cycle. Wild.
Brian.
Yeah, hi. So I'm gonna come at this kind of like from the conservative side of the spectrum, because I have some skepticism that it's even possible to remove money from politics, and I also have some skepticism that it's even necessarily desirable. So there's a constitutional argument, okay, about like what speech is, whether speech is free speech is given to an individual or to groups of individuals. I mean, I would argue we're all part of organizations, right? All of us within those organizations, we use free speech to fight back against authoritarianism, which is why free speech exists. And I have some severe skepticism and doubt about the idea of a centralized federal bureaucracy of any type trying to apportion rules and regulations for how money is spent. Because imagine any rule, say you didn't have Citizens United and McCain-Feingold was being fully enforced. Well, now it's being fully enforced by Donald Trump. And what does he do with that power? Right. And so to me, like, that federal vector is like the thing that is really dangerous, which is why we sort of structure the rules that we do, where we don't want the federal government to interfere with elections, like, at all. And so I'm curious what you think about that, and if there's other policy solutions that maybe meet that sort of constraint but solve the problem, because I do think money is a problem. It's a question of how you do it that matters. The details are important.
I agree with you. I agree with you on that point. It is the details that matter. I'm a big advocate of the idea that we don't need more regulation. We need thoughtful regulation. And I don't think that it is too much to ask, right? We say we don't want the government involved. Well, we don't want corporations running our country either, right? And the fact of the matter is that I don't think this ends up being a problem where we allow the government, right? And this is what you're describing right now, Brian, I think is a byproduct of the system that we have now, which is to say the government gets power and there's nothing we can really do that's reasonable to grab it back once they have it. It's now part of this giant bureaucracy that sucks and is slow moving and slow to react. I'm aware of those things. What I would say, though, is the same way that we limit, right? And so first and foremost, I will tell you that I know you said I was smiling when you said you're skeptical that we can even get money out of politics, because that's under the assumption, and it's always kind of been held, that we need to overturn Citizens United or amend the Constitution. And getting to either one of those places, given the composition of the court and given our inability to agree as a country, right? So we need 38 states to ratify this thing to get it to the floor. Is it possible? Yeah. Is it possible before our democracy is destroyed by corporate money? That I think the jury's out on. And so what I would say is, The path forward, and we'll get into this, but that's largely what we'll talk about this evening, is I don't believe that trying to get an Article 5 convention is a good idea. I don't think that we'll get a 38 state agreement on language. We've seen American Promise trying for a long time. We've seen, the day after Citizens United, Move to Amend formed, and that's run by a gentleman by the name of Greg, amazing human being if you know him. They've been focused on this, and we've got that amendment on the floor. It's got 67 signatures. I don't personally think that's the path anymore. And so what has happened is Harvard University, and a guy by the name of Thomas More, who used to be a chief of staff at the Federal Election Commission, did some research and found a segue around this, and that is through corporate law, state-based corporate law. All corporations serve at the pleasure of the state, period. All articles of incorporation and all the terms thereof come from the state. And so what they're doing is they're saying, okay, we're targeting state law to say you as a corporation, no corporation, can spend on elections. And I don't see a problem with that. I think, and that's happening in Montana right now, right? So it's coming to the floor. And what Money in Politics is trying to do is replicate what they're doing there, working with organizations in local states. The next state of target for the Transparent Election Initiative is Oklahoma. So we're working with folks from Organizing Okies, and we've got to reconnect actually, it's been a minute, but Organizing Okies and some of those different folks that have a loud voice in a state that probably needs our help the most. And we're going to try it there. So we start with the transparency law, right? Everybody's about that. If you look at most of these Republican states, one of the things that they fear the most is foreign influence, specifically China buying land, if you look in like Texas, for example, right? And with these C4s and dark money, they don't know who's buying it. They don't know who's behind these donations, right? So it's not something that's difficult to sell in a Republican state, certainly not something that's difficult to sell in a Democratic state. Money out of politics is nonpartisan, or as we like to say, cross-partisan, because this is an issue that affects us all. One of the things that we say is there's a lot of fires going on in our country all over the place. We see them. We see them with ICE. We see them with food benefits. We see them with healthcare. We see them all over the place. But the arsonist is money in politics. Who's stopping us from universal healthcare? It's not the people. It's the billions of dollars being spent to tell us it'll never work here. Who's cutting VA benefits? Not the veterans, right? It's people being duped into electing people that say they won't and then do. And so the way that I see this is we need thoughtful regulation, and to the point of, against federalism that you made, Brian, and I think that's really essentially the core of your argument, right? I think that, look, if you ask me, Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act would have been much more durable, right? Because he forced everybody to the table. It was really kind of an incredible thing what he managed to do, right, wrong, or indifferent. If he had put it on the states, said, here's your left limit, here's your right limit, right? Figure out what your state needs, fill this gap. Here's what you must do, here's what you cannot do. And then made every state come up with a system. You see it in some states, you see it in Massachusetts, you see it in Wisconsin. They have systems, healthcare systems there that the states would have chosen. Much more difficult to just get rid of with the stroke of a pen. Very much unlike the federal regulation, how easy that was to repeal. Now the states have buy-in. I see money in politics the same way. Maybe you want to incentivize folks by making it unlimited election spending a thing, right? But then when you have corporations deciding who's elected in that state and who's elected to represent that state. I think most likely what you see, because this is a benefit to politicians too. We spent 2 months last summer on the Hill meeting with senators and reps from Congress. They all had the same story. They all had different problems in their district, but they spend 80% of their time fundraising. This is something that we can nip in the ass if we get states to regulate this. Give them the right to regulate this. Let them, help them realize they have the right to regulate this through corporate law. Your thoughts?
I like the idea of corporate law. Like me and you have talked about it offline at length, but I know that Steph had her hand up, so I was going to let her, let her go. Steph?
Hey, all right, so One thing that I've really been getting into when reading into the money in politics and trying to get out of it is what I'm really hung up on is it seems like every politician comes for money. Every single politician comes for money, and you rarely get someone that comes from the bottom, not the bottom of the barrel, I mean, but regular person, a regular citizen, and somebody that has actually gone through some crap and lived through it and know what everybody else is going through. And one of the reasons why I see that that's not happening is because of the fundraising. They're not able to have the access. They're not able to run with their own money. Yeah, Katie just posted 2% of Congress is from the common class. Yeah, and what's crazy is that for fundraising, one of the statistics I found was that candidates with the most money usually win, with nearly 94% of the top funded House candidates and 82% of the Senate candidates winning in 2022. And then what was it? 2024, only 100 billionaire families accounted for one of every $6 spent in federal elections. Total of 2.6 billion. Now, how can we? Is there regulations that could possibly be adopted to help with that type of aspect?
Well, yeah, no, and I think that not so. I think what we're talking about is closing the loop. The way that billionaires are able to do that right now is through super PACs, right? And we would effectively shut that down. Billionaires are not, so maybe this is important for everybody to understand. Super PACs are 501c4s, right? Money out of politics is a 501c4 also, okay? 501c4s, donations to them are not tax deductible. Those greedy little turds are not going to be given $100 million of their taxable income over to a campaign. It's not going to happen. And so what they do is they filter that money through foundations and through 501c4s and all these things to funnel them into super PACs, right? They use offshore accounts. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. So I think the way to cut that down is individual limits. Doesn't matter how much money you have, this is how much you're allowed to spend. And I think what that does is it brings the politician, it makes them voter facing again, right? Because I don't have to go in here and have a big, let you take me out to a nice steak dinner at the nicest place in Houston, right? To get me to write you a check or write your campaign a check or write a super PAC a check that'll support you, right? Instead, I need as many people's support as I can get, and I owe them an explanation. I've got to look them in the face because let's just say for easy math, everybody gets $25. I need a $25 voucher from as many people as I can get so that I can get my message out. Right now, what you have is, like you say, a bunch of elitists, and it's always been that way, by the way. And part of that, it's a I think, psychological phenomenon, a societal phenomenon, if you will, where we tend to think a lot more of people who have money. We do, right? We find them more attractive. We think they're smarter, right? This is something that subconsciously people in this country do. And so, like, you're not gonna, if somebody's just went bankrupt, do you want to run in your town? Well, of course not. Right? So it signals to us that they're somewhat responsible if we see them as successful. I think that's part of it too. But I think that,
although our president has been bankrupt 6 times, so I mean, I'm just saying that's probably not a great example.
Yeah. Well,
but he is a personality, TV personality, so that works. But is there any movement at all on government-funded campaign base? As in, there's a lot of countries out there that actually they would provide the campaign funding, the airtime, and things like that.
Yeah.
So then that way you're not actually trying to fundraise or going after for those, steak dinners.
Yeah. So I think, and I think that's a great point, right? And then this is kind of goes to Brian, to another one of your points when we talk about, how do we regulate this? Because I have the same kind of hesitance about trusting the government with anything that I think a lot of us do, which is you're probably going to fuck this up, right? you're probably going to fuck this up, right? And then how do we unfuck it? It's going to take a million years because it took a million years to get here in the first place, right? And so it's nerve wracking, if the truth be told. And so I think bringing it to the states is a big part of that. That's helpful to keep it out of federal hands, so that you at least have the option to move somewhere that doesn't suck. You know what I mean, or that is more in line with your values. Whereas I think if it's managed at the federal level, in terms of getting more airtime, I think one of the things that you see, like in Europe, for example, when you get to a certain point in national elections, they get mandated airtime to speak to the people in long form. And I think that's extremely important. I also think that it's been interesting, and I'm curious to know your guys' opinion on this. When we talk about election spending, one of the things that we saw in the 2024 election was the impact of digital media, right? So podcasts, right? You have President Trump going on with Joe Rogan. You have Kamala Harris going on several different podcasts. You had Bernie Sanders going on with Joe Rogan. That's the first time I had the opportunity to hear Bernie Sanders in long form, right? And so that was the case for a lot of people. So a lot of these folks that previously all you see is 30 seconds, right? I've never heard of this guy, and now he's on the national stage because he's from New Mexico and I'm from New Hampshire, right? Who is this person? You get them for 30-second sound bites, maybe a debate or two, and then they're the fucking president. Not ideal. Not ideal, right? And so I do think that we need a way to get people on the national stage. I don't know how we get there. I'd be interested to know your guys' thoughts on how do we, because we can't give all, 25 candidates equal airtime across the top, right? But there's got to be a way to figure out, okay, who's leading and where, regionally or whatever, to get them that mandated airtime. And yeah, you do see some movement within cities on government funded election, right? So city funded elections. You do see now we're starting to see in several different cities and even in a couple states now, like Alaska, you have ranked choice voting, right? Which I think is fantastic. Alaska, like their elected official pissed off the Alaskans, and she lost on a write-in. You know what I'm saying? Like that, you should be able to do that. We don't like you anymore, and we don't like our options. This is who we want, and the voters chose that in Alaska. So,
Sam.
Yeah. So, I love the fact that we've already touched on essentially having like a public fund to essentially fund some of these elections. And I think that, again, if we want to talk about this whole idea of merit-based, well, if you can achieve the merit of being able to be on the ballot, why then should money be the decision on how much airtime or how much influence you can kind of then receive, right? I'm just saying, money doesn't necessarily equal merit to me. The other thing, because whenever I was going through the Citadel and I was doing, my political science degree, I really learned early on that domestic politics is ass and I hate it. Like, it is a dumpster fire of shit, and I wanted to avoid it so hard in my life. And yet here I am, a state liaison for 5051 SC for a year, and I used to be vice chairman of communications for the Reform Party, which, by the way, my brothers over there at the Reform Party would love to speak with you, I am sure. But now here I am running as Republican, in part because I think that the voice in this conversation is missing on that side, and I do think that it is reasonable to assume that because a lot of us are prior Republicans in here, that there is a want for this conversation to occur, and so it just has to happen. So back to this idea of things that I don't like about elections. Money in politics is definitely one, and that could be resolved by, essentially funding elections via the government in some capacity. But the other thing that a lot of these developed countries do is they limit the campaign time, because I remember distinctly during COVID, and I met the man, and he was nice. However, every time I pulled up YouTube, Jamie Harrison would come up on the screen, and I wanted to just destroy everything. I could not watch a YouTube video without seeing Jamie Harrison, and it was pervasive for months. And so like there's ideas like that, and I think that's an avenue that maybe we could go that would at least help in some capacity to just shorten the amount of time that we are inundating the American people with this propaganda-esque content. But another thought that I had, man, and it is trying to run away from me. Oh, the house is stagnant. The house is stagnant, and again, the money in politics is a big thing. The fact that our politicians are, donor facing rather than people facing is a thing. But like, man, what would happen if we just stopped capping the size of the House? If they had to figure out money for another 400 Congress, congressional reps, how would that impact the system, right? Because again, there's a lot of fires, right? And I think one of the reasons that money becomes such a big deal is you have like one rep per about 800,000 people, right? Whereas it used to be about one rep per 200,000 people, right? So if again, that rep acts as that liaison between the national level to the local level, right? The federal to the local, but that money is it's interfering with that, right? So if you increase the amount of reps, does that help kind of alleviate the problem, or is that beyond your scope? The whole bunch of shit at you. I apologize.
No, you're good. I think that's a good question. So I'm of the opinion, while I do understand what you're saying, I'm of the opinion that when it was one rep per 200,000 people, it's much harder to get messages out. I think that we achieve this by simply limiting spending. The only way to get them to turn toward the people is to make it not worth it to turn toward one person or 10 people, right? You got to turn toward the masses. And the only way to do that is to incentivize them by saying that their voice carries the exact amount of monetary weight as his voice or that corporation's voice or her voice, right? That's the only way to do it. And I think when you see that, you stop getting inundated because nobody's going to have billions of dollars to pump into ads so that it gets shoved in your face, right? People have a few minutes with you, and then you've got a few minutes with them, let's say, as a candidate. You've got a few minutes with those people. You need to talk about what you've done, how you've, made the promises and then kept them. And then you say what you're going to do. And then lean on your track record, and you got 30 minutes to do that, right? To draw people to your side. And you damn well better perform, because you're going to be in front of those same people asking them to believe the same thing. Right now, we get nothing but excuses. Well, you got to understand, blah, 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 blah. We don't understand fucking anything because you're sitting up here talking to donors instead of the American people. Because you consistently tell us you're going to do something, and then you turn around and you do something else for somebody that wrote you a big check, right? The only way to stop that is to stop those big checks coming in. That's my position on it.
Yeah, just to kind of follow up, right? Like I'm gonna try as best I can, because I don't want to spend a lot of money in this short kind of primary campaign. I've got 60-ish days left. I just put my donation thing on like a 7-day time scale, because I want to have time to go through the donations that are coming in and potentially reject things that I disagree with, right? And I understand that it's self-limiting, but like, is that not what we are to do as veterans and leaders within a movement? Then it kind of just hamstring ourselves and say like, hey, that like it is impossible to do this legitimately without a level of support and legislation, and you're going to have to make this decision: are we going to be right, or are we going to continue to let the insanity rule? And so, like, just understand that, like, from a candidate's point of view, I'm going to try as best I can navigating the chaos that is campaign finance, to avoid corporate donations, to avoid out-of-state donations, to tell the PACs and super PACs to pound sand, and just try to focus on local stuff as much as I can. But hell, man, even that I find to be somewhat problematic, because we're about to be in the middle of uncertain economic times, and I'm asking people for money that makes a difference. So it's like it's not easy. It's not easy.
You're bringing up a conversation I've had the world over with candidates in your exact position. First of all, money out of politics, like I said, it's cross-partisan. There's no judgment here. I completely understand the landscape right now. I understand that it is damn near impossible to compete with the money that's out there. And if you're taking donations, corporate donations, right, and but you're responding to the people, that's the system we're under. Our job as the people right now is to find those candidates, support them, vote for them, get them elected, let them do their work protecting us in Congress while we pass these fucking laws. Because that's the only thing that's going to change this, right? We've got to do our work here at the people level, at the local level. We've got to get the right people in. We've got to start targeting this corporate law, because we know it's legally sound. It's in line with the Constitution. And we need to be, and look, one of the things that Money Out of Politics tries to do, because again, we're not an organization of people. We are an organization of organizations. We are a coalition, okay? And the power of that is, if you look on our website, you can see candidates that have signed the pledge. I'm not going to take, blah, 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 blah. And it's not too hard on people. We're not saying you can't take, but know where your donations are coming from, right? Don't accept dark money is huge, right? Because you have no idea where that's coming from. But beyond that, do what you got to do to get in there and make a difference and actually represent the people. And then we, the people, our responsibility is to get in here and get these signatures and get these laws passed so that there's transparency and so that corporations can't just pump $25 billion into an election and steal our voice. Right. And I think that, it's incumbent upon us, if we're doing this at the local level, then it should come from the bottom up. And I think, Brian, that addresses something that I keep coming back to you, Brian, because I share the same concern. It lives right here where I'm like, oh God, if we let the government do anything, right, it has to come from the people. And I think that state by state, that's where you have success with it.
And I agree, like it's education of voters, right? And education of like people looking into. I do want to give a specific shout out to somebody running in my area, right? She looked into a donation and it was made to her campaign from someone that works for Palantir. And her husband is active duty and she's a milspouse. And she found out that he now works for Palantir and returned the funding. And so she was open about that and like put it on her social media. And it's just, that information matters, especially right now, right? Is like, we're all shaking our head yes when I was like, yeah, Palantir was trying to give her money. Like, not Palantir the company, but somebody that works there. And so like knowing what we know about Palantir and upholding the same morals, but finding out and digging into the candidates running in your district and who they're accepting funding from is like spending that time to say like, hey, yeah, you can say you don't accept PAC money or corporate funding, but someone in the same race accepted corporate PAC money. And it's just like, well, okay. Brian.
I'm going to ask a bit of a loaded question here, a little bit of a trick question. Okay. Everyone here at various levels is engaged essentially in resistance politics. Okay. And we're resisting the kind of current incarnation of, the Trump Republican Party. Do you think it's fair to say that Fox News is a institution that is essentially wholly beholden to the Republican Party? Would that be like a fair observation to make? Everybody? Okay. It's a $1 billion a year it's a corporation that makes billions of dollars a year. Effectively, the way they manage their press time, they are effectively an in-kind contribution to the Republican Party. So when we're talking about money out of politics, I mean, are we going to ban corporations that do things like media and communications from doing media and communications on the part of a political entity? And then are we going to say, well, no, actually you can't do that anymore? And then we have a situation of the government regulating the speech of an institution whose entire job is communications. So I'm not a friend of Fox News. I don't want the government banning Fox News, right? And so this is sort of the other thing, like money fundamentally is fungible, and it will, and it's driven by the incentives of the human beings behind it, and it will always flow to the lowest point. And if you, plop up a barrier that says, well, you can't spend money in this way, the money's just going to slosh into another location because the demand is still there. It's a supply-demand problem. And, so I wonder if, Mayhem, you had any thoughts on how you might resolve that conundrum?
So, I think that's a really, really great question. One, actually, that I haven't been asked before. And I think that my thoughts about that are that there is nuance to this. I don't mean to make all of this sound simple, right? If we start talking about, and I've looked into all of this, and I've come out dumber on the other side, or at least feeling dumber, right? It's like, okay, I'll look into publicly financing campaigns, and then I see all these like landmines in there, and I'm like, oh, maybe somebody's smarter for that one, and then this is one of those types of questions. I think that yes, the Constitution is above all for me, and I think we have to, and this is the difficulty, right? And I think that laws and constitutions are written this way because times change. Good ones are written to be able to be interpreted. I think that it's fair to say that we should be, and we have been, up until recently, as a democracy, running largely a lot on good faith. We're seeing what happens when bad faith actors get power. We're watching that, right? But it's also exposed all these places where you kind of look back and go, man, I hated that president, but damn, he was part of the good faith group, you know, that was doing good faith shit. He could have been doing all kinds of fucked up shit that he didn't do, right? Which is kind of refreshing, but it's unfortunate that we're just realizing that now. So I think that when it comes to things like that, I mean, of course we can go to the fairness doctrine, right? And we can talk about that. I think accuracy, if you're calling yourself a news channel, especially in the era of the 24-hour news cycle, I think it's important to have something like the fairness doctrine. And I think that it kind of addresses that. But I think another way that we address this is, you know, you can't, I always say if one of my favorite sayings in the world is if you think there's only one way to skin a cat, it's because you're a fucking idiot. Okay? There's so many ways to do so many different things. And if you know, look at the border, right? We know the things you got to do to fucking secure the border. We need more magistrates. We need a little bit more funding and more patrols on the border. We need a faster path to citizenship for our neighboring country, right? It shouldn't be a 10-year wait for somebody who could come over here and be a tax-paying like contributor to society, right? If you make it so fucking hard to become a citizen or apply for citizenship in the United States the right way, people are going to jump the border. That's a fact. There's like 5 things you got to do, and we'd have had this shit handled. They don't want to do it, right? And it's the same thing with the questions like what you're asking, Brian. We don't just get to say, all right, corporations, you can't spend money anymore because money's not speech, and then ignore these other glaring issues. I think they all have to be addressed, right? Hey, let's limit funding state by state, and then introduce state-by-state fairness doctrine, right? Federal mandate. Hey, you know, this isn't going to fly. You can't outright lie. You can't misrepresent facts. You have to state, you know, this is an opinion piece or, you know, an editorial before you go on to state your opinion. I mean, there are all kinds of ways that we do this. I don't claim to have all the answers. In fact, I would hate to be the one responsible for coming up with an answer for the country. I think state by state, almost always, outside of human rights, you know, if this is something that has to do with like, yeah, you know, it's a matter of opinion, how much should we allow the individual to contribute to a campaign or the corporation to a campaign? But we have to have those conversations. But I think state by state's the way to do it.
So I got a kind of follow-up observation. So, I mean, obviously I set up Fox News for that because I think, you know, it's a prominent example. We all hate it here, I think, for the most part. What about, like, say, someone like Tom Steyer? He's an environmentalist. He's also a billionaire. And so he spins up, like, all these newspapers, and they talk about environmental issues, and it's just really big for him. And it's a passion project for him. It's something he cares about, and he puts money on it. Do we say he can't do that, and he can't do, like, issue-based things? Like, there's just a lot of things that happens in the weeds, and this is where it starts to get dangerous. And this is really where my skepticism comes from. Like I don't think I'm having difficulty on how we even define the problem and where we put the lines. And I'm not even sure there's a theoretical framing. What we're doing is we're saying, okay, we don't like this, so we're just going to regulate that. And then, oh, we don't like that, we're just going to regulate it. And it's going to be like whack-a-mole. And like the desire for influence is there because this is a black market problem. Like you have a market. There's a market for influence. And that demand is going to flow somewhere. And it's just a question of what the path of least resistance is for the money.
So I think I find this, and I don't mean any offense by this, but I find this to be like an argument that doesn't stand up to scrutiny because of the fact that there are so many places already doing it, right? Like you have systems in the UK that we can look at. Look, we're constantly told that will never work, but that is almost always the billions of dollars talking. Doing away with slavery will never work, right? Allowing women to have their own bank accounts will never work, right? Like all this bullshit we've been. Smoking's fine. In fucking 1950, your doctor could hook you up with a cigarette right there in the exam room. You know, oh, that's fine. It's not bad for you, is what we said. So I think that this is one of those things. I think it's very much one of those things where I think we can address this thoughtfully. I think that absolutely, but I think the problem, and I think that maybe the source of the angst that you and I both share here, is that this stuff's been coming from the top down for a long time, and that's why it sucks, right? Think about prior to 1970. People talk about that being a time when America was great. I get that it was prior to the civil rights movement, but what they're talking about is economic freedom, the ability to be a fucking waitress and pay for your own apartment and put yourself through school. and have a pretty good life, right? That's why they called that time. That was when things were happening from the bottom up. Companies were still beholden to the people that they employed. As soon as they got enough political power, all that stopped. Now what's the new hotness? Companies want to see that you have diversity and you hop companies every couple of years, right? So it's changed the landscape, I think, tremendously. And I think that we can thoughtfully address all of these issues as long as they're coming from the people, right? Because we're gonna see this stuff. You sit in a room with, half the room is smart people, half the room is dumb people. You're going to come out usually on the other side where, the smart people are kind of seeing, I got a point there. And the dumb people are like, yeah, I see how that wouldn't have worked. We come up with solutions. We're able to do this, right? It's just the government talking when we say that we can, in my opinion.
So, ma'am, my thing is that, despite the fact that we have, despite the fact that there is a clear problem with money in politics, right? There's clearly an issue that exists in the fact that money has an impact on how much airtime a candidate gets when they're running for office. It has an impact on how much visibility that they have with the people, right? I would almost say that the situation in Alaska is evidence that the money in politics isn't necessarily the biggest problem that we have. And again, because you and I have had this conversation on multiple occasions, I legitimately think that it's a lazy voter. And on top of that, I think that it's also a lazy candidate, right? It's easy for a candidate to go out and say, hey, give me money, and then use that money to put themselves on TV because they don't have to get out of their car and go knock on doors, right? So at what point do we say, we're not the victims of big money as much as we are the victims of our own laziness and the tendency to lean more towards comfort rather than attempt to actually go out of our way and make a difference?
Yeah, so I don't characterize it as laziness, right? I do characterize it as apathy, and only in the sense of the fact, not that they're apathetic about the state of the country or where it's headed, but they don't believe that their vote matters anymore. And I think that largely they're right? The individual vote, and I'm talking specifically about national elections, and this varies so greatly, and of course there's a lot of local elections where things are going swimmingly. You have places in like Maine where they have ranked choice voting, right? And we see it in several cities. But I think it's apathy. People are starting to realize they're being drowned out, right? And I think that you can trace this back to, this really kind of changed around like the 08, 09, right, time frame. And so, again, I think that right now, our tendency, one of the things that I live by, there's a million CEOs out there. My father-in-law said this to me one time. He said, there's a million CEOs out there that a company will hire that come in and they have great answers, but they're not answering the right question. The key is to start with the right question. And so I think what we see when we talk about money in politics, when we talk about voter apathy, what we're seeing is we're saying, well, we just got to get the voters motivated, right? But the voters being unmotivated, right, is a byproduct of them thinking, okay, I'll go out there and vote, and it doesn't fucking matter because somebody's pumping billions of dollars into these elections and no one's listening, right? And everybody's stuck in their phones and they start to believe the nonsense. I mean, how many, raise your hand if you've got a family member that has hit you up on many occasions with some shit that you're like, how do you think that this is true, right? We've all got one or several, right? Like just, they hit you up and like, what do you think about this? Do you have any insight? What's the government told you about this? And it's like, first of all, the government doesn't tell me shit. I'm a cook or whatever the case may be. It's like, what do you mean? That I think is, and so when we see shit like that, what we want to do is address those specific issues. Let's get out here and educate voters. Let's get out here and XYZ. The problem is that these people have been conditioned over the course of the past 25 years, 15 at least, since Citizens United, and probably prior to that, to start really kind of believing that they've been banging on the door and nobody's answering because these people are looking at donors. They're not responding to voter needs. Things have not been getting better. The wealth gap is increasing. Taxes go up. They just proposed a $1.7 trillion defense budget, up 8% from last year. But heaven forbid we, dump a couple billion into SNAP. I mean, come on. You know, that's why people are discouraged. So I don't think it's apathy, and I think that I think the arsonist here is money in politics. When people, you know, I gave this talk in Oklahoma City, and that talk was about dignity, right? And you have to, people have to have dignity. They have to feel like their voice matters. They have to feel like their work matters. They've got to have something to fight and live for. And if they don't have that, and if they feel ignored, they become apathetic, right? People, shit gets hard, people give up. I mean, that's kind of what happens. And so I think the arsonist here is making sure that people feel included, they feel heard, they feel like they actually have somebody up there fighting for them on the Hill. And as soon as people start to feel that, what you'll start to see, right, like you saw in the 90s, I can't wait to get to the booth to vote that motherfucker out, right? It's kind of the same energy we've got right now. You saw that across the country in all kinds of pockets when they were unhappy. But now they're realizing that these people that are funded by billionaires get reelected anyway on name recognition.
Well, so I would counter you that the problem is not the fact that these politicians have so much money and they're able to just get themselves reelected, because at the end of the day, who's casting the vote? We are. And so what I think that the issue that needs to be addressed is like you said, you hit it on nail on the head, voter apathy, right? The voters don't feel like they're being heard, and they don't feel like they're being represented on Capitol Hill. Yet at the exact same time, every single time there is an election, they will typically vote for the incumbent. Regardless of whether or not they think the incumbent is good for them, they will vote for the incumbent because of either A, party line, right? In the case of Nancy Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi has been in for centuries now, and you know she doesn't seem to be leaving because she makes money for the party, and so like the voters, no one will run against her because the party won't support anyone who goes against her, and the voters won't vote against her because, like you said, name recognition. But if the voters understood what the way that she was voting, if the voters understood the things that she was doing on Capitol Hill, if the voters understood the way that she was representing them, I feel like that would be more significant in impact on whether or not the voters would continue to vote her in than taking money and donations out of the political sphere, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that leads to kind of what you're talking about, right, is it's generational, right? So, you know, there was a time in this country where it's like, yeah, that guy's a quack, we're not voting for him, and then they vote the next person in. And that was how it worked, and it worked fine. And nobody took advantage of the system in a big way. I mean, you had Watergate, you have these little scandals, you know. But they weren't like stealing from the American people, right? Not to the scale that we're seeing now, right? And so I think that you had a time when voting mattered and it was going great. In the 70s, you have this huge spike and money starts to play a much bigger role in elections. And so now you have the people that raised us, that generation of people is a generation of people that would vote Republican, get pissed, and then vote Democrat, and then get pissed and vote Republican. And they swung back and forth like that. The problem is that nothing fucking changed. Things continue to get worse, right? That's, I believe, where the apathy came from. You had a generation of people that encourage their kids to vote. That's our parents. Our parents come out, they vote their asses off, they switch back and forth between parties to try to get somebody who will do something without kind of realizing that money is sneaking in and taking control of these elections, right? And so now we are at a point of serious voter apathy because it doesn't matter who you vote for. Let's be honest. Did we not just see Cory Booker with a $5 million fucking donation from APEC? I mean, so now we're at a point where if people do vote, they vote definitely no, right? Or they vote, you know, against the lefty liberal, right? Or for the racist, you know, pick your poison. It doesn't matter. The point is, we're not now electing. So the baseline has been bad for a long time, right? We've got people from both sides of the aisle taking money all over the place, not representing the people they were elected to represent, period. That's what's going on.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I guess my last point is
yeah.
to the fact that would it not be, and I keep planting my flag here on this hill, but would a more informed, more well-informed voter base, like electorate, be a better counter to money in politics than going state by state and trying to introduce these laws, which would eventually get voted on by people that are bought by the companies that they're voting on passing bills to end, right? None of that makes sense. So if the answer is we need to take money out of politics, which I agree, then are we attacking it from the right angle, or are we focusing on the wrong thing and allowing our feeling of victimhood to shape the way that we approach this problem?
So I think you're looking at this through a uniquely American lens, which is pull yourself up by the bootstraps, rugged individualism that simply never existed, right? When we talk about like pioneers running out to the Wild West, the army was murdering indigenous people to clear the way for them. All right, this was not the American cowboy out there with his fucking rifle defending his land. It's not what happened. Similarly, I say here that we don't that rugged individualism that we tend to believe, right? We look at this and we say, well, you know, it's just voter laziness, and all we got to do is just this. And I think that in the 70s, the 60s, that was true. I think right now, if you think that you can get enough federal support to pass fucking anything, we can't even get the TSA paid. So I think it is absolutely incumbent upon we the people, yes, but we have to regulate this because the system is captured, guys. Let's not forget the inauguration. The blatant set of billionaires sitting behind our president, one of whom just paid $75 million for potentially the worst film you've ever seen. Okay, an outright bribe, if you ask me, and many other pundits agree. All right, so we have to get that capture out of the system, right? I think that there was a time, John or Carl, where this worked, right? Where he could have said, we just got to get in here and kind of put in some work. But these laws are having success, and we have a lot more success getting things done locally, I think nationwide on average, than we do nationally in Congress because they suck. You didn't tell me I said that. You're muted, Katie.
Carl, I want to believe in a more informed voter base would like change this country. However, you have to think about the voter base as it sits, right? And Mayhem talked about it. You have the boomer generation, and Mayhem, this is where I'm going to wholeheartedly disagree with you on that generation and them flip-flopping, trying to vote for a better future. I think that generation flip-flopped specifically to vote for a better future for themselves. And what I mean by that is making themselves more wealthy. My own father is a, shining example of this. He was in a union. He voted Democrat till the day he retired, and then he became a very far-right conservative. And so when we're talking about informing a voter base, how are you going to do it with Gen Z? Studies show our attention span is 7 seconds. Everything like short films is how that generation learns, or it's how they consume their information. So when you're talking about trying to educate our voter base while we're decimating the education system across the country, I live in Florida. We don't believe in books anymore. So are we just going to do it through TikToks or Instagram Reels to educate Gen Z to get them to vote and be well-informed voters? And that's my pushback on that, is how do we get a generation that thinks politics is entertainment, because that's what we've made it. We have made our political system entertainment for the world. It's not, policymakers out here making decisions. It's who can make the most outrageous comment to get on TV and get the short clip and the views. And if we're raising a generation, our children's generation, that thinks that that's normal, like how do we go back to an informed voter base that thinks politics is not, reality TV? Like the government should not be on TV every night. Like I remember when we were kids, like you never saw politicians on TV unless it was something serious. Like now we see them every day and it's something outlandish. And so that's my one pushback on that is I would love to see an educated voter base as a policy person. I'm sure Steph would love it too, so that we don't have to explain stuff word by word what things mean. But I don't see it in today's society, and so therefore I also contend that there will always have to be money spent in politics for them to get their message out, especially to the younger generation. I'm here for the government, funding it, but money will inherently have to be built into that system. John's had his hand up forever.
Yeah. So before John goes, real quick, Katie, you're asking the right questions, right? I think that those are the right questions. I don't disagree with the problem of money in politics, but I think that we're asking the wrong questions when we focus on money in politics.
I'll agree with that. 100%. John?
Yeah, so I think I'm gonna get on a soapbox here for a second and just make a comment. So I think most of the people on here understand that rights are given by God, enumerated by the Constitution. So for me, when I talk about things like regulation and corporations being people, why am I getting that look, Katie? Katie has a look. uh, so anyway, but corporations, right? When we talk about the corporation as a person, I have a business, right? And corporations really can't represent all of their employees. They can't represent the bulk of their employees. They only really represent one thing, and that's the officers of the company, the board of the company, and they're there for the benefit of the company, which its values are profit and survivability and other things that are not necessarily compatible with democracy, right? With freedom, with those rights that are God given. So I never really understood that whole argument that unless you're polling your entire company and getting some kind of voice, and we can say, companies, you can vote with your feet, you can go somewhere else, but if there's only one employer in a small town in Tennessee, that's who you're working for, right? And so I'm gonna actually share this screen really quick. So when we talk about regulating this and getting money out of politics, we are talking about, maybe educating the electorate. It's really important. But how are you going to educate somebody out of this kind of stuff, right? And so let me get that shared. It takes a second. All right. So this is GEO Group. So GEO Group is a private prison corporation, right? And so they've spent about $4 million. And I look, so there's other companies that do this too. They've spent just about $4 million there and probably another $4 million or so in just lobbying, right? So these are one of the top money contributors in the country. Now, in order for this to be profitable, that means after they spend this money and after they spend capital to build prisons, and then after and after and after, there has to be a profit at the end of it, because that's what companies are built for. They're built to make money for a small amount of people. And what does GEO do? They give money. Most of their money went to Department of Homeland Security and ICE and appropriations, and they are out there the ones pushing for people to be arrested and detained, to loosen the rules. And I have a nonprofit, I don't want to name it here, but I have a nonprofit that helped Afghan refugees, right? And so what happens it doesn't matter what we vote, because what is going to happen is this money is going to override that vote. And it's essentially going to say, all these rules that we have about rounding people up, we're just going to get rid of them, and we're going to change them, and we're going to manipulate them, because GEO Group needs to make a profit. And so what this is doing is smothering the light of freedom in our country, right? They're getting per person detention fees. There has to be enough people detained to make GEO profitable for resale or whatever their purpose is, to make a bunch of people billionaires. So while I understand the argument about, regulating can become heavy-handed, it can become this, any of those kind of arguments, I do understand that. But if you are actually not regulating and you're not looking at this in a way that the most important thing are those fundamental freedoms that are granted by God, enumerated in the Constitution, and this money is being used expressly to limit that in people. So it doesn't matter if you're a citizen, you have rights. It doesn't matter. When you're in somebody's country, you have human rights, not just because God gave them to you, not just because they're enumerated, because it's the right thing to do. And money like this in politics buys politicians. And I'm actually going to scroll down. I mean, look at where the money is going, right? They also, two companies gave $500,000 each to an inauguration fund, which we can't even track, right? There's no public reporting on where that money is or where it's gone. That kind of money can be regulated, and there are solutions that we can, and I hope we have great ideas to figure this out. But until we get this kind of money out of politics, I really fear that the whole concept of freedom in America and people's choice, because we are not choosing things like this, are really just muted. So thank you. That's just a comment, and if you want to comment back, Mayhem, I would appreciate it.
No, I mean, I don't disagree with anything you've said. I mean, these are huge problems, and I fully disagree with you, Carl. I absolutely think money in politics is the disease, and I think that the proof in the pudding is all the change that we were able to affect, and you know, even the number of one-term presidents you saw, byproduct of voter power, right? A demonstration of voter power. And as soon as the floodgates opened, I think that stopped, right? And now we have what we have, and it's not going to get better until we solve this problem. That's my opinion. And I think Brian and Sam had their hand up.
No, Logan. Let Logan go.
Hey, what's up, Mayhem? Thank you for being here and talking about this topic, man. It's something I personally dig a lot, and well, suffice to say, I think you and I are pretty aligned on this, so it's not going to be too much hardball. But I do want to touch on a few points before I kind of ask you a question, because it's a question as well that I've wrestled with a lot, right? I've been wrestling with a lot lately. But before that, you know, like, look, when we talk about a few concepts, one is, you know, the American voter being uneducated, right? A democracy cannot function without a well-educated, you know, voting base, right? I think most people would agree with that. There has been a war on public education, in my opinion, since the 70s, right? You know, with consistent defunding. And it's gone into fucking hyperdrive in the past, you know, whatever you want to call it, you know, 8 years, you know, 10 years. Well, with a little gap in between, right? And what the effect of that is honestly, you cut funding to schools, right? You demonize teachers, you demonize intellectualism, or whatever you want to call that, right? And you get what you get, right? You know, you get, you know, people looking at Trump like he's some big brain fucking genius out here. When you look at his tweets, it looks like a drunk uncle, right? I mean, that's what we're seeing. And so, like, there's obviously some gap between what we used to consider, you know, a competent statesman versus, you know, what we're seeing today, right? You know, and I think there's a few other things. Like, look, I do think the 24-hour news cycle played a massive role in this concept of politics as entertainment, right? And our country is suffering from that. This is an epidemic. We've seen this before in American political history, so I do have hope, right? The Gilded Age specifically was fucking bonkers. The Tammany Hall era was fucking bonkers. You know, I was very lucky to have some awesome professors to talk through political history with me at a very granular level. And, you know, I think that's what we're seeing now, right? Is that kind of Tammany Hall era, Gilded Age era of, you know, mudsling, talk shit, you know, it doesn't really matter. The ultimate end result is the working class is going to get fucked. Billionaires are going to get what they want. You know, the good thing is, when I look at that, is, you know, that gave birth to the progressive era, right? And we got things that we take for granted now, right? And I don't want people to be confused when I say progressive era with the modern connotations of that, right? But there's some commonly held ideas that we have now that shouldn't be thought of as a given. You know, 8-hour workdays, weekends, you know, 7-year-olds not dying in mines type shit, right? These weren't the norm in America. And hell, frankly, I mean, you still see a lot of that stuff where it's not the norm across the world, right? So we have to remember, when we're thinking about the consequences of concentration of wealth and the disenfranchisement of voters and what that means, right? The other thing I do want to kind of bring up with Carl, because I do understand your frustration. I have a similar frustration that there's some voter apathy here, right? Or lack of education. That being said, that's extremely difficult to do a fix in a short amount of time without addressing the root causes that Mayhem, I think, is talking about now. Of there's no impetus politically to change this, right? And there never will be unless we take the onus upon ourselves to push politicians and to push the government to essentially enact legislation that prevents, just the outright buying of politicians, right? And I don't think that, educating the populace is just not something that happens quickly, right? Civics education fucking sucks in this country. I think Sam mentioned that earlier in the chat, and I couldn't agree with you more, right? It's mind blowing. I'm very lucky I went to a Department of Defense schools growing up. My father served, my father was a civilian servant. And I got a phenomenal education in England, right? Fucking phenomenal. Things that I thought were common knowledge about the way the government worked, or just in general common knowledge, I didn't realize were not common knowledge until I joined the American workforce when I came back to America, right? And it hit home when I enlisted, right? That's when it really hit home. And it was like, holy fuck, how did you guys graduate high school without knowing this? Right. But it's reality, right? And it shows just how bad our public education system is, right? And that's not a quick fix, right? What is something that can happen quicker, or at least incremental and piecemeal, and which I agree with you, Mayhem, I did some digging on, your kind of legislative tactic of going state by state, what they're doing in Montana. Love to talk to you offline about Oklahoma. It's where I was born, have a lot of friends there. I think that's the way, right? For me personally. That being said, and this is where my question comes in, and this is something I've been fucking grappling with a lot. I think I've talked to Katie about this a little bit, but there's 10 or so issues that the vast amount of Americans agree with, right? And, when we talk about money in politics specifically, it's something ridiculous. 70 to 80% of Americans, regardless of party line, party affiliation, agree to some degree that we should get money out of politics. Yeah, 80%, which is fucking bonkers, right? When you think about that, 80% of Americans agree on anything, fucking anything whatsoever, right? And 80% of Americans agree on this, right? Why is it so difficult then to make this a reality, right? We've been dealing with Citizens United now since 15 years, about, close enough if my math is right. Why are we still here, man? Why are we still dealing with this? Yeah,
Great question. Great question. This is the very same question. I was reading a quote from Ruth Bader Ginsburg that said, her dying wish, right? She straight up said, we got Citizens United wrong, and her dying wish was to see it overturned, right? That spoke volumes to me, because agree or disagree, that woman had a brilliant legal mind, right? And so that was kind of my starting place. I'm going, okay, let me look into this thing. And when I looked into it, the first thought I had was, why is nobody doing anything about this? This is absolutely and utterly insane, right? And then I started digging into this space, and there's tons of people that have been doing tons of shit about this since the day Citizens United, like I mentioned, Move to Amend was founded that very next day. When I was on the Hill last summer, this was very much the question I had. Every single lawmaker and every single office and their chiefs of staff all said the same thing. We spend 80% of our time fundraising, and it fucking sucks. And just to share with anybody who might be watching this, right, give you a little picture, right? It's something that I didn't really quite understand. But you go in there. So first of all, if you're a candidate and you get elected to the national level, you and selected members of your staff, probably your high performers from the campaign, come with you to Washington, D.C. They uproot their families, they take them there. If you do not stay in office, those same families get uprooted again, and they go back home, right? And also, they're out of work. They don't have a job anymore, okay? So you got to understand, these chiefs of staff, as it were, are responsible for these families, right? So their fundraising efforts are directly tied to whether or not these people eat, essentially, okay? So that's the first thing. The second thing is, everybody's afraid to break the fucking system, right? Well, if we can't raise money, how do we get elected? How do we protect our job, right? And then, I go over and listen, I even came across a fucking feud. We had one member of Congress that had put forth a bill regarding getting money out of politics, a very good bill, right? The chief of staff from this other office was saying, yeah, man, we like the bill, but they'll never vote for it because, they've got censure against this other politician, and they just, anything that's got their name on it, they won't vote. And I'm like, are we fucking seven? Because you're making $186,000 a year, okay? And by the way, this is one of my big passions, and you guys will get this as vets, okay? You mean to tell me that we send people to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and then we elect those people so they represent us. And you go out there, and the best idea that you and these other world leaders can come up with is let's send our poor people to kill each other, and whoever kills the most people is right. That is inherently fucking stupid. It's stupid. It's the very first thing we teach our kids not to do, right? And yet, so the feuds, the immaturity, right? The political rivalries, and everybody being afraid to break the system is why there's been no movement, and because we the people have not made it so, right? Hey, you vote for this or you're fucking out, and then let heads roll. Let heads roll. People will start doing what the people, and again, if we get money out of politics, right? They're no longer looking at a little group of high impact donors. They're turning because they need the support of the masses. They will start bending to the will of the people, and that's the point. That's bottom up government. So to answer your question, I don't think there's a good excuse. I think we have to do more at our level, and I think they need to fucking start behaving with some maturity for the amount of money that they make. Pay me $186,000 a year. I can go up there and not do shit myself. That's too easy. Shit. I'd be good at it too.
Sam.
But, you know, they do say that warrant officers have the sharpest skates. So I want to kind of go back to Carl's point from earlier. Again, I taught social studies for 8 years to ninth graders at not even the honors level, not the AP level, to South Carolina's kind of lowest level that isn't self-contained, college prep. Okay? The apathy is real. It is a cancer that eats at the core of the system, and there is so little ability to affect change. It doesn't matter how relevant I make it to their lives. I mean, to give you an example, I gave my seniors, because I had a government class, and I did a chapter on political socialization, essentially. And I had the students pick an issue, any issue that they cared about. And this was during Black Lives Matter, right? And I have a whole bunch of black students. I said, pick any issue, right? I want you to research that issue, right? We'll do a paper on it. We'll go through some of those aspects, and then write a letter to a representative or write a letter to somebody in government. Again, doesn't matter who, that you think can affect change, because the goal is to have them and to teach them, like, do you want to write a local representative? Do you want to write one of your state, or, a senator or a congressman or president, or maybe somebody that sits on like one of the executive, like, again, target it. And I can't tell you how many people didn't even do like the outline research of the damn project, man. And this is a class that is required for graduation. And then I got the school breathing down my throat saying, well, how are you going to get these kids class? Well, they turn in fucking papers, what they can do. So like there is a true apathy in the system. And I very much agree with Carl on that one. But where I kind of diverge on that is when we talk about money in politics, and lazy politicians, I don't even think that it's on the same level as like we're talking about the Elon Musk. We're talking about PACs and super PACs, not politicians with money that can be lazy, right? Like that. Like, I'm not talking about Nepo babies. I'm talking about like the Carnegies and Musk and the people with so much money. They have an insane ability to manipulate the system to their whim. And that in lies the problem, the glaring thing that I think that is worth addressing. And the thing is, not all of this is mutually exclusive. Like, we should be, right, essentially attacking each one of these weak points right, in unison. And anytime somebody, again, I see it as a line. We're holding a line. We're finding a weak point. We're exploiting that weak point, right? When somebody finds a weak point to exploit, everybody else, that coalition, moves behind that individual for that period of time and pushes that advantage. Then you set and hold firm, and then again you start poking that perimeter to find where that next weak point is, and then you hit that and you hammer it, right? And so you can address the apathy in politics when you get a strategic win. It doesn't have to be, hell, not even strategic. It could just be tactical, right? Like this is guerrilla warfare of the people to the entrenched oligarchy above us. We have to find the exploits. We have to be able to move that needle with the people. And again, it goes with targeting money in politics. Everything else is going to start falling into place. But when we look at the oligarchy at its core, I agree with you, Mayhem. The arsonist in the room is the money in politics, because they get to set, they get to be the gatekeepers, right? They get to be the gatekeepers to what the public sees. Um, ooh, yeah. I mean, again, are people easily discouraged? Yeah. Is it laziness, or is this just a survival mechanism? Right? Because as much as we kind of sit here and care about it, we can all probably agree that this shit is killing us, right? Like, how many of y'all were exhausted after the ordeal of last night? How many families were exhausted after the ordeal of last night, right? Again, it is April. It is what, the month of the military child, and we're playing fucking Trump roulette as to whether or not we're going to go commit a genocide. You know, I just, I don't know how much we would be here if it was not for the influence that was bought into his campaign by Elon Musk and others. And so, like, I can't even win the battles on the student side because there is so much made for TV bullshit that comes down the pipe. I guess one of the things I can say is we talk about red pills, blue pills, black pills. How about you get some fucking diet and exercise, right? Like, how about you go exercise some constitutional rights and get the fuck up off the social media, you know? Like we need a detox. But I think part of that comes from that money and politics aspect, the corporate aspect that, you know, we need to target and address, because you're right, that is where the stream of shit often spills from. That is the pollution to the waterway. And in order to create a soil that is nutrient rich to grow a fruitful democracy from, we must deal with the pollution that is money and influence from people that have concentrated wealth through relatively dubious means.
Yeah, there's a couple things, and I'll be brief. I got some notes. Actually, Steph, if I see you have your hand up, and so does Carl. So.
Okay, there we go. Sweet. So, I got a devil's advocate question. And I haven't heard it raised. I might have missed it when I had to step out. But would basically removing corporate funding from campaigns, but also adding more regulation and more, I guess, visibility on the campaign fundraising, will that make it harder on politicians to actually do fundraising in the first place? Will that make their job harder for the fundraising? Is that something that you've heard in any arguments?
No, I think I would think that it would be, but again, I think it levels the playing field. And again, those conversations that I had with them on the Hill, they hate it. I mean, they're just on the phone.
Okay.
They're getting calls, right? So you gotta understand too, you've got an office in DC and a staff there. You've also got an office and staff in district, right? And so you've got people calling into your district office, and you're spending 80% of your staff time raising money, both in-state and at the federal level. You got 20% of your time left. That is not enough time, and it's certainly not enough resources to address the needs of the people. And so I think what happens is as we reduce spending, they turn to the people. That's the only way that needs get met, right? They have to need those votes. Right now, the way they get votes is not by appealing to the people and then supporting them by defending them on the Hill. The way they get votes is by appealing to billionaires, getting millions of dollars, and then broadcasting this beautiful message about what they're going to do and then never fucking do it. That's what's going on, right? And so it exposes it so much more cleanly if we get the money out of there and make them go and talk face to face in town halls. It doesn't even have to be face to face. I think it was, I can't remember. It might have been, I can't remember who said it, but he brought up, it might have been Carl or Sam, but when we talked about increasing the size of Congress, you know, I'm working on a platform right now that connects nonprofits, voters, and politicians. Because and one of the things is nonprofits will be able to connect with politicians to solve in-district problems. But one of the requirements for politicians is that they have a fucking town hall that's publicly broadcast to everybody in their zip code online. People can tune in on their phone and see you talk directly to your people. Why the fuck are we doing that? It's so easy. I mean, how many times have we seen people tune in and get 1 million viewers? Yeah, I bet you could get 1,000 of your voters on there, but they don't want to do that because it's accountability that they don't want to have. Because their accountability is always to the people writing the checks, not to the voter.
There's a few representatives that's done that. I was in Charlie Crist's district in Florida before he tried running for governor again, and he did do that regularly. I believe he tried to do it every quarter. He even used to do it monthly during COVID. Good. For everybody like getting upset about and anxious about everything that was going on, and he even did it over the phone because there's older people in that district that. There's a lot of senior citizens because it is Florida. Sure. They didn't understand how to do it on a computer, so they did it over the phone, and they had that set up. And then when he left, it was Paula Luna. I cannot remember her long ass name. Sorry. Yeah, she's got other nicknames. I will refrain from using them. But Representative Luna is she has not done a town hall, I believe, since her first year, and I believe she's a 2-term congresswoman now, maybe 3. I haven't lost count since I've left that district, and it's just wild. Less and less conservatives actually do their districts, and it's really difficult. But then it's also a lot of conservatives the incumbents tend to stay until just recently. So it would be very interesting on how fundraising would go, since there's been doing a lot of flips recently, but it would be very interesting to see how things would go on the fundraising when they have to change their timing around.
I think you'd see a lot more in-person stuff, right? I think you'd see your politicians not on the Hill, but out in your city a lot more, right? You'd be needing those votes.
Need to pay TSA first, so they can fly back home. Yeah.
Fair. Carl?
Yeah, so, ma'am, I'm sorry, but I'm standing firm on the fact that I personally believe that the informed or the lack of informed voter base that we have, an uninformed electorate, is the disease, and money in politics is a symptom. I mean, you said it yourself, right? In the 70s, we had a fairly active voter base that was fairly informed, that made that made their judgment calls based off of, generally speaking, how their representative represented them. And Katie, I agree. A lot of the boomers were very much self-centered and focused on how is this going to benefit me, and all of that kind of played into the rise of voter apathy, right? And as voter apathy started to increase, it allowed for money to seep into the political spectrum. So I would again say that the voters' in unwillingness to be informed about what their representative is doing is the main problem, right? And I would also go back to a point that Katie made of like, how do we inform them? How do we make sure that they know what's going on? Well, they have to want to know. They have to have a desire to actually go out and do their due diligence, right? Katie, you've mentioned in the past about how your representative has brought 0 funds back to their district. How many people besides you know that? And I'm willing to say or I'm willing to bet that that percentage of people that don't know that is probably above 50 to 60%. Right?
So
And that is the problem, right? That is the problem, is that the people don't fucking have a clue what the fuck is going on and what the representatives are doing, either A, because they're unwilling to look for it, or B, because they don't care and they're just voting because of party bullshit, right? I think that the biggest barrier to getting people to run against incumbents is the party system writ large. If we eliminated the party system, if we went to ranked choice voting and we allowed for that to happen, I think that what we would see is the voters becoming more informed and money becoming less important.
Carl, can I just ping right off that really quick? I do see your point, and I think there's a lot of value in what you're saying. There's also some value in keeping the serfs uneducated, right? Because I think I made a comment there, right? If people really knew how much they were getting fucked, they would be carrying torches and pitchforks and running into the representatives' offices, knocking down the door, because that is a way that change can happen, but our leaders aren't looking for that. So I definitely think there is something to say about, what is it, the mushroom thing? You put them in the dark and feed them bullshit. If you keep people uneducated, they're not going to rise up. So I will give you a lot of, I want to give you some on that point. I think it's a good point.
okay, so I want to jump in here briefly because I want to touch on something that we've kind of danced around a little bit and address it kind of directly. Okay, so you guys are kind of hitting on something that I want to just kind of get on the table, and that is that yes, a lack of education is part of it, but I think we do ourselves a disservice if we don't understand kind of where that came from. And so I want to bring up the point that economic conditions have led us to have our parents outside the house. We've got now devices in everybody's hand that entertain them. It's convenient. I've got an 8-hour workday, which somebody brought up. I think it was Logan. I've got an 8-hour workday, probably required for both parents to do that if we have decent jobs, right? Say something that pays $50,000 or more to survive, especially if you're somewhere like Boston. Okay, so you've got that economic situation. So we just, as a society, have much less time for our children, which I think leads into what you see with Sam. But I want to bring up a very important point. Education is failing in the sense of the fact that we're teaching people what to think instead of how to think. You should be able to find any solution to any problem. You should be able to think critically through something to determine whether or not it's bullshit. I should not have my mother, asking me questions about wild shit. And I'm like, I've got a little framework that you can use to think through this, right? So these things happen and it's frustrating, but I want to point out why that is. And I think it starts with the advent of the 24-hour news cycle. So there's a book out there, it's called Stolen Focus, and you guys have touched on it. I know Sam did when he was talking about not even being able to get students engaged. You talked about how do we get the attention of Gen Z, right? And so Stolen Focus really goes in depth, and the way that they measure this, Google has a repository of like everything ever written, digitally, right, stored. And they did an analysis for the purposes of this book to find out, to see how long particular words or phrases persist, to make a determination of we as a society, what our focus is like. So obviously back in the day when print happened, right, you get one newspaper worth of information per day, right? As we move up and we have more magazines and newspapers and now news programs available, people are getting the equivalent of 4 to 5 newspapers a day, right? The 24-hour news cycle, we began getting the equivalent of 76 newspapers a day. That is a fucking ton of information, and it is certainly more than you can do anything with. Today, we are receiving more than 200 newspapers per day. As you all know, since you've been on the internet before, half of it's bullshit. So we're taking people out of the house for 8 hours a day, right? We're popping kids in their foreview, right? You get home, you've got to address that. You got to make sure they're on task. The phone is raising this fucking kid at this point, or the school system is. How much time do you actually get with that kid to motivate them? Not very much, okay? And so what I say, and I'll just loop up right here and let other people talk, but what I say here is, you guys ask, well, how do we get to these folks? The key is community. People talk about, well, we're part of the resistance. The resistance has lost its fucking meaning, okay? I was a resistor in the military as an SF dude, okay? What we need to be talking about is resilience. Resilience. Because if we want to get to a general strike, if we want people to be able to separate the chaff from the whey, we've got to be out there having conversations with them. Okay, we gotta have them off their phones, right? We gotta help their grandmother get to medical care because she lives out in the boonies and they just closed their fucking hospital. These are opportunities in our communities to start having these conversations. My sister came to visit me recently, and I'll stop here. My sister came to visit me recently, and she's notorious in her family for not giving a fuck about politics, right? She's, I mean, you know, I was on the phone with my mom, and she showed up, and she said, "Hey, don't talk about politics with your sister. She hates that shit," right? But at a certain point during our visit, my sister looks at me and she goes, "You know, I see all the stuff that's going on, right, with ICE and all this, and I'm starting to get the sense that, you know, because I just haven't paid attention to any of that shit, and I'm starting to get the sense that I really should. What do you think?" Oh, hey, bitch, I thought you'd never ask. You know what I mean? I had nothing but stuff to say to her. But we're seeing this. We're seeing this. I have a lot of high hopes for Gen Z. I'll end it there.
John?
Just real quick to tap on what you were saying there, I do think there is some awakening though, because just you know, I've done a bunch of No Kings protests now. I've been to DC, I've been to the No Kings in you know, in Boston and a few in my town. I actually go out and protest with Brian. We give speeches and we talk. And the latest one, at both of them, I've met new veterans that were like, "This is my first No Kings protest because holy shit, what is happening?" Right? So I think there is some kind of noise that does get through, and I do think people are hearing it. I do think there needs to be more education, and it's going to be on people like us that have either, you know, some kind of reputation, or we have the right social groups to be out there doing shows like this and getting getting the word out and using that privilege that we have, right? Because we do have a privilege being a veteran. We earned it, but we have it, and a lot of people will question other people's patriotism. And it's really hard to question someone's patriotism when you're like, "I'm a veteran and I'm telling you this is wrong and we need to have fixes," and things like that. So I think the louder it has become and how absurd it has become, because right now the amount of money in politics is absurd. The amount of billionaires and the amount of damage they can do is absurd. Does get through at some point. So I just want to say I do have some hope, and I do feel people are listening and showing up that weren't necessarily going to show up before.
I agree with you. As time has gone on, we were talking about this on a local scale. As time has progressed since February of last year to now, like the amount of veterans I see coming out in veteran hats, veteran shirts, you know, like easily identifiable as veterans, has increased. And so I do believe that what we are doing is working. And Logan.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Like you know, I'm really glad that we're talking about hope right now. I mean, I think it's really easy for us to get, well, it's easy for me to get into doom and gloom, you know, especially because I know a lot of you touched on it, and like Mayhem, you know, talked about it, like, you know, we're glued to these fucking screens, you know, and we're just flooded with all this shit all day long. And if you're doing this type of work, it's easy to get caught up in the doom and gloom, man. But yeah, I mean, to people's points, that I think, you know, it gives me hope, and it gives, you know, me hope, even though, you know, I agree with Carl, by the way, in regards to, like, there's a lot of apathy, and like there's people that are uneducated, and obviously if you have an educated populace, it's a, you know, big danger to incompetent politicians. There's no way I'm going to fucking disagree with that, by the way. Like, there's no way. Right. What I will say is, like, for me, like, we can argue, I think we're going to come at it in different ways of how to solve the issue, right? And how to do the immediate changes. The things that I have hope about, though, like people have mentioned, right? Like, I think of my father. You know, he went to his first No Kings protest in Oklahoma City, you know, this last No Kings. You know, this is a dude that's voted Republican my entire fucking life, man. You know, big Bush one guy, if you can imagine that, right? Of all people, you know. Yeah, but, you know, that says something, right? This is a man that he just retired, dedicated his life to, you know, working for the DOD. You know, and I see, you know, other people that I know, and then of course I know people that are just never going to come out of it, right? Or it's going to take some time, right? And that's fine too. Like, you know, it's America, man. You know, man, it's part of the beauty of it, and all its ugliness. Yeah, the Gen Z folks really interest me as a population, man. I you know, got lucky and I got to speak at a, you know, event right before No Kings, and it was largely, you know, it was interesting to see that breakdown. You know, there had a bunch of people on stage that was, you know, kind of cross section of Gen X, Boomer, and myself as a millennial, and a few other millennials. But I looked out in the crowd, and there was a fair amount of Gen Zers, man. You know, and it gave me a lot of hope. You know, it's you know, same thing when I hit the streets out here, especially with more of the direct action shit. Like, you got to the direct action shit, like, you know, with, you know, the PSL cats, DSA cats. They're younger, dude. You know, and they're fucking hungry. They're not fucking happy. You know, the anti-ICE shit. You know, they're out there. They're ready, man. Same thing when I look at the anti-ICE in the veteran community, right? My shout out to my homie Steve Nunez, by the way. If you get a chance, check him out on social media. He's out there in LA on the front lines all the time. You know, posting good content. If you check us out on 5051, you'll see his shit all the time. But you know, you know, same thing, right? You know, combat vet. You know, up in the fucking front lines. You know, giving it hardcore. You know, fighting for this thing, right? And to your point, he's out in the streets having conversations, man, right? He's out there, you know, forming those bonds for mutual aid, and I do think that's the fucking answer, and I do see that now. Yeah, the money in politics, man. I do think apathy is a big issue. I'm a lot more hopeful at this point in the game because pain's happening. You know, and it's not just that it's the, you know, concentration of wealth that people see, but more so the pain that people are feeling. Like, you know, you touched on it. You know, I live in Massachusetts. You know, my wife and I do decently, and still, like, we got a budget, man. We don't ball out of control, bro. Right? You know, we both work more than 8 hours a day. Right? We have 2 fucking kids under the age of 6. Right? You know, it is non-fucking stop. Life is in session, my man. Right? So when you look at all that in its totality, man, you know, what I kind of see is that, yes, there is, you know, a fight for, you know, the capital of intention for ourselves and our children. But I also see a lot of people still, in spite of that, doing the work and saying, you know what, this is a fucked up system. This is a fucked up situation. Back in the 1950s, it was completely feasible for a singular parent to work, have a car, have a house, send kids to college. You know, that correlates to large union, you know, fucking large unions, you know, and membership, you know, and I'm obviously a big labor guy, you know, I love, you know, my friends in labor. You know, so, you know, I look at all that and I have hope, man. I do think we're going to get back there. You know, the Gilded Age gave birth to the Progressive Age. I think we're going to get there. I don't know if I will get the benefit of it in my lifetime, or that much of the benefit of it in my lifetime, right? But if my daughter gets it when she's an adult, fucking beautiful, bro. I personally don't think I'll ever be able to retire, and I don't even give a fuck at this point. You know, it is what it is. Yeah, other than that, I just went on a rant. I will say this, man. I fucking have loved this talk, dude. Like, I would love to see more of this and, like, hear more of what you're doing, man. This has been fucking phenomenal, bro.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy these conversations. And Carl, I love that you disagree. Look, I mean, the fact of the matter is, right, everything that we think we know doesn't mean shit until we prove it on the ground, right? So, like, I take all of the avenues I can get, because, again, if you think there's only one way to skin a cat, it's because you're a fucking idiot, right? So my thought about how we solve this, I know getting money out of politics is going to be massive in so many different ways. But I'll be damned if I'm not going to be out there talking to fucking voters too, right? I'll be damned if I'm not going to be out there in my community trying to help people, and then also asking, did you vote? Who are you voting for? Why, right? Because then that's where the education starts to happen. Brian, I don't want to step on you too much. I know you had your hand up the whole time.
Yeah, it's all right. So I'll be relatively quick. This really isn't about money out of politics. It's just something Logan said. He was talking about his old man being a GW guy. Okay, George W. Bush gave a famous speech. Yeah, right. Sorry, one HW. Yeah, one. This president. I'm also a fan of him, by the way. This president in particular had a speech that he gave right near the end of his tenure called the 1,000 Points of Light. And when he gave this speech, he was specifically talking about the fall of communism and the creation of all these democracies along that line of scrimmage between those two areas. And the 1,000 Points of Lights he was referring to was actually the activist organizations that he intended, and he did fundamentally, and his predecessors did, send at scale into all of these countries to help build these nations up. Okay. so there is a crossover here, and the reason I think about this is because, being right of center myself, but also active in the movement at a leadership level, I think a lot about how to talk to Republicans and how to get them to come out, like how to talk to them in their language in a way that isn't going to threaten them, but is also kind of dovetail with, the more progressive side of the house, and get people to kind of unify. Like I want to figure out, as a fundamental kind of function of movement growth, like how do you bolt like comfortably John McCain and AOC into the same tent. And it is really important that we figure out how to do that. So I would entreat on everybody to embrace all future conversations the way we did with this conversation with Mayhem, and with a spirit of openness here, because this is something we actually have to figure out. We are a cantankerous coalition. The infighting is fierce. It subtracts all our energy, and we have to find ways to get rid of it and sort of slim down a little bit. And so that's all I had to say. And Mayhem, thank you for doing this. I played the role of kind of a loyal opposition here. I do think we have to get money out of politics. I'm skeptical of the mechanics, but I agree on the fundamental principle. Like, we got to figure out how to do this. This is a problem that we got to fix. So,
No, I really like what you said there too, right? Like the infighting thing. Again, I say we're money out of politics is cross partisan. I don't get wrapped around the axle. You don't hear me talk too much about Trump, right? Or really anybody. The only thing I give a shit about is communities and electing people that represent the people. That's it. Like, I'll give you an example, right? We talked with District 5, Tennessee. Tell me if you think that's blue or red, right? It's Andy Ogles, if you didn't know, all right? And so I've got a good relationship with his chief of staff.
That guy's a piece of work.
He's a fucking piece of work, right? But his chief of staff's brilliant, right? And he is aware that his politician's a piece of work, right? But again, like, you start having conversations with these folks, and you see how much of this is all about getting the punchline and getting some airtime because the name recognition gets you reelected and blah, 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 blah. It's all this performative bullshit that we've been talking about. And that's why, I did a lot of work in the last year at the national level. And the conclusion I've come to is that it's the local level where it happens, period, right? It's in your state and not really far outside of that. Now, I do support other states, and, especially people that live on the border of Alabama and Georgia, right? Get in there and help your Alabama folks knock some doors for candidates, that's worthwhile. But definitely get in your local communities, talk to people, bring Republicans in. If you're doing work with vets, there's going to be some Republicans, right? And it's perfectly fine to pull them in. I fully agree with what Brian said there. We got to have everybody. It takes everybody. And I think one of the things that we can investigate, and I'd like to hear your guys' thoughts on at some point, maybe not tonight because I know we're running out of time, but what are the issues we all agree on? That's where money in politics, like I said in the beginning, started. Find the issues where we have commonality and then build relationships off those common issues. You'll find, just like anything else, like if somebody says, hey, can I get $20? Like, no, fuck you, I don't know you. But if I say, hey, Katie, can I get $20? It's a different conversation because we know each other, right? And I think the same thing about politics and people giving a fuck enough to see things from your perspective starts with the relationships. Over.
I do want to say something, Brian, to you. I thought I was probably one of the only people sitting here that knew of that speech by H.W. Bush. The Points of Light speech, and the reason I know about it is because there is a George H.W. Bush Points of Light award that is given out yearly in this country, and in 2017 I was a finalist, and the woman I lost to, I'm glad I lost to. I feel like she deserved it much more than what I was doing. But it is a great speech, so I'm glad someone else knows that speech. I learned it when I was going through that process, that vetting process for that award. So,
real quick on that, on HW, I wouldn't say I'm a fan either way, but I have a tremendous amount of respect for how he handled Desert Storm. There were a lot of calls, right, for him to chase the Iraqi army back into Iraq and finish it off right there at that time. And he said, that was not our objective. We're getting the fuck out of here. That's military leadership as far as I'm concerned. That's what I want to see from a civilian. Yeah, we could do it. Yeah, it might serve us later on, but are we going to put American lives at risk for something that's not our mission? No, we are not. We're going home. That's how it's done.
I agree. Sam has had his hand up forever, and then I want to wrap up with our fun closeout segment that I think we all are going to find hilarious. Go ahead, Sam.
Appreciate it. I'm a filthy moderate, right? I don't generally publicize that too much within our, because everybody hates the moderate, but everybody wants the moderate, right? Like you want the moderate on your
Preach.
side because you need it, but you hate the moderate because the moderate says, well, there's a lot of good points that are being made. Hey guys, gals, there's a lot of good points that were being made, and here's where I'm at. People don't give a shit is probably, I would agree, the big issue. People don't care. Why don't they care? Voting options are limited. Voting option is limited. Polarization is high, right? There's a reason that I went from third party to Republican Party is because it's just not feasible, and we have to do the work where we can. And if you're going to have open primaries, hi, gerrymandering allows politicians to pick constituents rather than constituents to pick politicians, right? And thus you have very high reelection rates. Money silences the voice of the people, and life is busy and information is overloaded. I think those are some of the big points that we've made tonight, right? It's really busy. There's a lot of information to decipher. Politicians are entrenched. And honestly, entrenched politicians and money go hand in hand. If I know that this guy is going to be stable for a period of time, or woman is going to be stable for a period of time, I'm going to make sure that if I'm a corporation and there's stuff within that district that I'm working on, I'm going to be working that over, right? So essentially, the lack of turnover in Congress, I think, kind of plays into it too. But all of those things together say that why even try? Why fight the system? Why dedicate the effort? Why try to find a time to go? Because we don't give people the day off to go vote, right? We expect them to fit that in amongst the other part of life. So we actually don't incentivize and prioritize voting within the workspace. Why then, would we really expect people to go out and engage with it? So I think that all those are important topics, and I can't tell you which one is more important than the other because they all must be addressed damn near simultaneously, right? Or in short order of each other to actually disrupt the system, because otherwise it is going to re-find equilibrium and the people aren't going to have the foothold needed to essentially retake what is ours, what the Constitution gave to us, right? And then from that, I just want to brag on my people in 5051 SC, right? Like we're a broad group, right? We have a lot of people. We're pretty chill. We don't have a lot of internal strife and drama. Part of that comes from focus on mission. And the other reason that like our protests don't devolve into that too much is because we act as a funnel to the community groups that already exist. Mayhem, to your point, every time, like in our last No Kings, we had 20 groups that were tabling in Columbia alone. 20 different groups that were tabling. We had candidate speeches on the South grounds, on the backside of the State House, right? So we were doing voter education. We had tabling groups to build community resistance. And that's kind of what we do. Like, we don't try to operate too much in the streets under 5051, right? Because PSL does a really good job of mobilizing. And again, you have manpower, you have labor, you have just time that it takes and just the amount that it burns people out. If PSL says, we like to march in streets, dog, you got it, right? If we're the ones that are hosting at the State House, we're bringing people in so that they can go with those smaller communities and then go and do that work. And that's how we diffuse tension, is kind of like the damn federal system, where we gather for short periods of time all together for a common goal, and then they go back to their corners to work on their pet projects, and they go after what matters to them. And I think that that's what we're talking about here. Money in politics matters to you. I think that is a noble as hell goal. I want to be able to help you with it. But at the same time, the ADHD and the teacher in me also wants to go and deal with the education of the public and the civic, right? Like, I want to be in all the places, but we don't have to do that, because if your mindset is focused to one task, why would I pull you from something that you're efficient at and put you at something you're inefficient at, right? And I guess that's kind of where I'm at, is we're doing a lot of really good work. And I hope we keep it up. And I don't know how to prioritize one thing or the other. I go back to the moment that somebody finds a gap and finds a way forward, we rally behind it and push it for a period of time until they hit that stabilization point, and then we go and we find the next gap. So we got to hit all these things at the same time because they can't stop us all.
The only thing I'll tack onto that is that's exactly how I structured Money Out of Politics, to do that very thing, right? So I structured it as a nationwide organization, and we started with recruiting people. It became very clear to me very quickly the better way was recruit organizations. And then we went from that to coalitions, and then we went from that to state coalitions. That's where the power's at, and that's why my focus became local. But my point has always been, right, and this is kind of how we relate when I said, lots of fires around the United States, Money in Politics is the arsonist. There are nonprofits that do everything from healthcare to food to tracking ICE to helping you with your Social Security paperwork to legal assistance. They're doing all of it. Every gap that exists, there's somebody out there working against the problem set, and chances are they're a member of a coalition. So I realized very quickly, Money in Politics is impacting all of these gaps. They really are, because these are unserviced folks that we're talking about. And so, it became a thing where I started bringing coalitions in to say, hey, we're not telling you that your issue is not the number one issue for you. We're just reminding you that Money in Politics is probably blocking progress toward whatever your issue is. And that has been true. I haven't found not one case where it hasn't been so. That's all I have.
I think that is a really good way to end it tonight, Mayhem. And John, if you have anything? Okay. He was like, no. We are going to close out in a brand new fun way. We had talked about it. We have been doing safety briefs for a while because that's endemic to our culture. We find them funny. I think what we find funnier is human beings talking shit about us and calling us all sorts of fun bullshit, right? And keep it coming. We find it hilarious, and we're even going to highlight you now live and read your shit because we find it funny, especially when humans come on and comment fun stuff. So everybody is going to get to read one, and then we are going to close out. Carl, do you have them queued up and ready? Yeah, we're going to call this section Hate Mail. So, night one. RP Joe says, are you talking about PTSD? Come on, there's nothing that they're going to do to fix your problems. You have to fix your problems. I spent more than 20 years active duty. Everyone complained about their health care. Now the VA healthcare. Complaints about VA healthcare. It is what it is. Move on. Well, RPO, I mean, the problem is that the VA healthcare sucks and we're trying to fix it. And the reason that we're complaining about it is because it sucks and we can't fix our problems. We end up shooting ourselves. So, fuck you, but you're welcome to come on. Come debate us.
I don't know. This is just nihilism.
It is.
It's well, I mean, it fits nicely with what we've been talking about, apathy. There's nothing you can do about it. Just move on, bro.
Yeah. You get anybody talking shit, calling us names?
You sound like a fucking quitter, RPdo, just so you know. You sound like a quitter.
Mm-hmm.
Carl, you got the next one? Oh, man. Who wants to take it?
I got it. All right, I'll even do a voice for this one. No sympathy. We have been the bad guys in every war since we first began committing genocide against native peoples in the 1400s. PTSD is a good way of telling American soldiers that they are Nazis and they are going to a bad place when they die.
Wait, what was that accent, bro? Like, what was
I have no idea, dude. I'm a D&D nerd, man. I just make some shit up.
That's amazing.
This message is brought to you by Fat Guy Bikes.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Is this guy cheering the death of soldiers? Is that what he's doing?
Yes.
That's pretty much what it is.
Hey, and I'd like to point out,
Yeah,
you
you're a
fucking
patriot, buddy.
dumbass, that we
Real
are
American
the people,
hero over here.
we were part of the deciding factor that defeated the Nazis. So your argument doesn't even make fucking sense. But I do understand them saying we've been the bad guys because
Yeah, we're not.
can't
We're,
say that we
not
haven't.
we're the
Quite a
bad
bit.
guy. We're the bad
But-
guys
but-
now, but that's all right.
We're the bad guys right this moment. Yeah, but calling us Nazis is ridiculous. Go fuck
We'll
yourself.
learn. I have something smart to say about this. The wrong way to look about it. The wrong way to look at a nation is good or evil. Like, nations are not good or evil. They are a story where they have good or evil within them. And the story of that nation is the conflict inside it about its own good and evil. So do we have the right ideals? Do we have the right principles that allow us to conquer our inner demons? And that's the question we're trying to answer now.
Next
I
one.
like how you brought philosophy into.
I brought philosophy into hate mail.
Brian, did you black out and say that? Was that really you? No, I'm just kidding.
Oh God! All right, next. Oh man, Nick. Nick, this one was for you specifically. I was gonna have Nick read this one.
War. To New Israel, this battle is not ours. It belongs to Almighty God. It is not a battle for men. It is a spiritual battle with God Almighty. And principles of darkness, not men killing one another. But God said, I am for peace. They are for war. So it is choose today whom you will serve. It is our choice. I choose peace.
Nick, you gave her way too much credit on punctuation on that.
No.
That was Rory. That
Apparently,
wasn't Nick.
punctuation is not holy, or it would have been a part of it.
I know two things. I know one that Miss Rogers thinks God is Almighty, right? That's clear from this passage. It's also very clear.
I wonder if she's lost God Almighty.
I need someone to come get their grandma. Like this.
Some gam going off in all caps, dude.
I knew it was bad when the first name was Joyce. It was like,
I mean,
From the Zionist Jews.
let's be honest. It's probably in all caps so she can at least half-ass read what she wrote.
Or she can't figure out how to turn it off.
like this
Yeah.
Probably why there's no punctuation. She doesn't know where it's at.
It's a bad
It's too slow.
What I want to know is if she tapped the caps lock key, or she tapped she just held shift down the entire time while she was typing it. I'm trying to figure out which element of rage she was expressing here.
Her arthritis.
Logan, by the way, this was on your video, but which makes it even funnier.
Wait, the God, the Almighty God, like that was for my video.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I like it. No, like honestly, like I'm just really stoked, like all the voice acting that I'm getting here. I've been following this group on YouTube and Discord called Third Shift Studios. They're making this video game called Debauchery and Magic. They're actually looking for community voice actors. So I'm really gonna encourage Brian and Rory to hop up in there, man. Send him an email.
I will do that in exchange for a 50-51 plug. So,
yeah, dude, they might fucking put it in the game. They put in community shit all the time. Honestly, it's the most ridiculous game. Yeah, Third Shift Studios, Debauchery Magic. Check it out. Yeah.
All right, Carl, next.
Who's reading it?
Mayhem. Read this one. Come on, Mayhem.
Hold on, I'm gonna read this in the voice that I feel like this person has.
I'm going to be honest. I don't give a fuck about American veterans. Not a single one. But taking the American view into consideration, this message needs to be out there. Just burn it all down.
Gotta be his voice.
I don't even think that
I
tape
feel
mail.
attacked a little bit because I'm a little nasally. So
I don't feel like that tape mail, man. I feel like that's a positive, probably. Like I don't know if this person's hating on us. I feel like they might be agreeing. I don't know.
I don't know. This one, I was kind of like, this is kind of a weird one. I think by the name that they are Irish. Because that is a very Irish
I
name.
do agree with the burning all down at the end. So
Yeah, I was like, yeah, this is not good.
KO.
All right.
Yeah, I hate that. I hate that. I love Irish people.
This one was yours, Logan. This one was under you.
Yeah, Logan gets all the.
Oh, dude, you gotta see the 50-51 inbox, bro. I'll fucking start bringing some of those in there, man. Yeah. Oh my god, they're out of control. Okay, Goose 7796434. TDS at its best. It's called restructuring. Ellipses with an extra period. The old VA was totally corrupt. Ask any vet how long it took to get an appointment. Ellipses. Stop lying. Tell mommy the ceiling needs a new paint job.
Fuck. That's a good. That's a Russian.
Yeah, I'm gonna critique.
You know what's fucked up too is like, hey, why would I paint my fucking ceiling? They're tiles, bro.
Somehow,
They're tiles,
is that
man.
somehow code for kill yourself?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's what it is. Paint the tile, so I gotta kill myself now. That's not very nice.
I mean, I don't know. That might be giving them too much credit for the nonsense that has been placed here.
I mean, it also could be,
Who knows? I was hoping we would have the one that called me an AI. That was the one I really wanted to.
I can't respect anybody that uses ellipses unironically. So
I was going to say this is
Yeah.
definitely like a phone in a Pakistani apartment somewhere. This is not a human.
yeah. We found the Russian bot, guys.
One of those.
God, give me a second. I'm having technical difficulties right now.
Well, now we're gonna get more tape now.
This one, Carl, this one was yours.
Why do I have to have this one? Your husband approved hospital messages?
It was on your video. That's why I'm making you read it.
What is it with MAGA? Like, this is something I want to understand, actually, because there's a psychological thing here. Like, what is it with MAGA and, like, AI slop? Why is it all these guys think slop is, like, clever? Because it's not. I look at it. It's like, this is hot garbage.
thought
You're
this
a
was
hot
real.
garbage human. Stop doing it.
They don't think this is. They don't think this is a cartoon. They're like, this is real, man. AI, all this stuff.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
You know, and I just want to point out that, and I'm not being any type of way, right? But I would like to point out that in terms of dental hygiene, I think the Democrats have it.
I do appreciate.
Didn't the GOP gave away the stimulus checks? That's free money. That's free stuff from the government. Didn't they do that? We all forgot about that, right?
Well, see, you got to understand, Steph. Your point doesn't support their point, so
No.
I do like the.
Yeah.
Oh man. John, you read this one.
Jesus Christ. Hello, Thomas. 196767. Look at that fucking guy.
6'7".
I love this guy. Oh no. You slash and see, you stupid liberals. Never check into anything. Actually, this is all streams together. You just repeat what you hear from your M. Yes, M, B, and then no. He's cutting fraud from the V.A. He's cutting fraud from Medicare, Medicaid, and you people turn around and make it look like, comma, wait, comma. He's cutting frog, and he's cutting things from Bad Man Orange. Shut the up and do some investigative research.
Is it voice to
John,
text?
you almost probably. John, you almost slipped into that creature NPC voice you do in D&D. By the way, you were almost there.
That
I
is
was
true.
waiting for that.
I have a creature voice when I play Dungeons and Dragons, and that was almost there.
So look at that guy's mug. Like, what's the over-under on him being a meth?
I've got good money that says there's a reason he's not showing his teeth in that fucking smile.
Yeah, you know, he's the guy they should have put on that previous picture, right? That would have been the
No,
correct person. to put.
Honestly, as I think about it, the amount of spit that must have been spraying out of his mouth while he was trying to type could have been typing on a wet
feel like
screen.
this was.
It's unforgiving.
I feel like this is a drunk dude on the toilet, like just rage texting.
Oh my god.
Hey, and he's going for the punctuation during a hard Valsalva.
Yeah.
Oh God.
I'll let you guess in context what that means.
I'm good.
God.
Alright, Carl, 2 more maybe?
2 more.
I don't think Steph has done one yet.
Yeah,
Or,
Steph. Rocket.
Oh, you gotta do it.
Oh, this was a
Yeah.
question.
This one isn't much hate mail, more of a, I guess, a question.
Yeah, that we were.
We gotta get serious now.
All right, Jose Rosales 7744. I feel you and I believe you. My question has been since the beginning, what is this president doing with all of the money? Billions going on a war that is not and should never be our Israel. Why is Trump there? It is as though he owes everybody something else or they have something on his ass. Yes, they do.
Yeah, I mean, compromise. You got the P tape.
Yes, they do.
Putin has it.
Well,
Authoritatively.
The picture of him giving somebody
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a little
And
less
also,
funny, more horrifying. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, also his family is also profiting off of a ton of people in the Middle East right now, and all those people doing the peace talks, they're actually working and making a ton of money in their investment firms. So,
Yeah. This wasn't funny. This is morbid.
I actually would think that, like, when you talk about Trump, though, like, imagine having somebody that's so broken and so open to suggestion and, like, flattery. Like, they want him in office because they could just tell him shit, and then, you know, his son will get a $700 million drone contract, which will cost American lives because they'll never produce a drone.
No.
Right? Like, that's, yeah. Oh, whoa.
This one is for Sam. We are going to close out with this one. Sam, take us out.
Chef Marty Rose. Laughing face, laughing face, laughing face, laughing face, laughing face. They signed up for this. Were you a pussy serviceman? Trump.
That was great.
I think it's almost Italian though, is the way I wrote it. I don't think it's pussy, bro.
It's pussy.
Pussy. Yeah, it's it's capitalized at the beginning, bro. I'm just saying.
Well, good job, Sam. It sounded like you were.
I mean, it's
saying
almost.
Hamlet.
I mean, if you're a dude or a lesbian, it's almost like a compliment, isn't it? It's like
That's the neighbor to the other Pakistani phone. That's Pakistani.
I mean, like, really, I mean, you can just put an R to the end of the E, and then like we have like a fairly solid job title in the Marine Corps.
Great snort. I love it.
Yeah, another thing too. So I waste a lot of time arguing with like MAGA chuds on the internet just because I don't know. I hate the MAGAs, and so I just vent on the internet. I'm like, so I totally do this. Like, why is it they always use like emoticons with shit? Like they can't like type a word. They have to like do a picture. Like they can't make an argument. It's like Trump, and it's like a picture of like an angry face libtard, and like that's the argument. Like
And
it's like arguing with a pigeon
and
or a walnut.
the
Like,
passive aggressive laughing emoji on your comments too. It's just
oh yeah, those are
awesome.
great. Oh, I collect those.
Brian,
those are victory
you bring up
marks.
such a great point. I guess all we should really say to this person is fist fire flag.
Oh my god.
Well done, sir. Well done. Absolutely.
You've kept me later than my intended time, you fools. I'm getting off this call.
Okay, all right, let's close out. I do want to thank Mayhem. Thank you so much, Mayhem, for coming on and for teaching us. I think education is important we spoke to the importance of it tonight multiple times, actually, of the value of it. And so it is important within our own community when someone has that knowledge that we all don't have, that you share the knowledge. And so I want to thank you for coming on. I hope you come on again and we continue this conversation because, like we said, 80% of the population thinks that there is a problem with money in politics. And so we do need to come together and figure it out, either at the state level, like you want to do, or on a national scale. We thank everybody else. Thanks everybody for coming for this valuable conversation. We do this every Wednesday and Saturday from 8 to 10 Eastern, and we partner with Carl with Crayon Box Politics to do the Smoke Pit. And we encourage anybody watching, if you are a veteran and you want to come up here and chat with us and just come into the Smoke Pit, even if you have very different views than us, we encourage you to come talk to us, right? Like, and we hope Nick can somehow figure out his internet in the middle of the desert. Because we do value these conversations openly for everybody to see, and Mayhem and everybody spoke to it today of the value of these hard conversations of people that have differing belief systems. So thank you everybody for coming, and we will see you on Saturday night.